shirt. It went down, down the back. Down. It was bad.
And they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Just feel them crawling around. They hit you, they dive bomb you. It was bad. I don't know why. I mean, I don't remember it being that bad. But they were bad Friday. It was nice out. It was nice out. That's what it was.
No, I didn't ever see any, so you must have just smelled them.
Must have been.
I just didn't go outside, so.
Maybe that's what it was.
I was working on the combine, so they were all at it.
Oh, that was probably the problem.
Probably. All right, we are in Judges chapter 19. We're going to get through the last 3 chapters pretty quickly, probably a couple more weeks, and then we will go back to our study on Revelation and finish it up. And so, when we get to Judges done. So there's only 21 chapters, and we're close. This chapter 19 through 21 is the same event. It's spread over 3 chapters. But as we talked about, the key to these last really 5 chapters of the book of Judges is focused around chapter 17 and verse 6. The verse said, in those days there was no king in Israel, every man did what was right in his own eyes. Okay, so you're going to, if you read through to the end of chapter 21, that same verse is seen there both times. So it's interesting because the beginning of these 5 chapters, 6 verses in, and the end of these chapters, you have the same verse, which are talking about what is going on in these 5 chapters. And so we had the man Micah and the Levite, the first 2 chapters, and their rejection of God, trying to do whatever they thought was right. Really, it was a focus upon today's denominationalism, right? Because they claimed that they were following God, they claimed that they were serving God, but they were making their own idols, and making their own place of worship. They were making their own priests to supposedly worship God, and thought God would be pleased with it, and he was not. And so it doesn't state that there, but we definitely know that he wasn't, because God doesn't bless them for this. And of course, it's against everything God had told them to do. And so we can imply that God was not happy with that. Then we get to chapter 19. We have another Levite man. It's interesting that it's always a Levite man. It's in the middle of this. But we have another Levite man from the mountains of Ephraim. Remember? So even because we finished talking about Samson, which is way farther in history, the last 5 chapters of the book are actually really closer to the front of the book. But the mountains of Ephraim is where this has all been happening. And there is this Levite who was traveling. He went to get his concubine, the first part of the chapter, who had not been faithful to him. She then decides to go back with him. Her father tries to get the man and her to stay for a while, and they do for 4 days. After 4 days, at the evening, he decided it's time to go, which was a bad choice. He goes by Jebus, which is, what's another name for Jebus? Jerusalem, right? Goes by Jebus, which at that time, Jebus was inhabited by foreigners, was inhabited by the people that they were supposed to drive out. And this Levite man says, no, we're not going to spend the night with foreigners. We're not going to spend the night with people that are not the Israelites. So let's continue on to the next city, which was Gibeah. Well, Gibeah, as we talked about, and Ramah, they're close together. Gibeah and Ramah are right here. And this would be in the tribe of Benjamin. These are his people. These are the Israelites. This is the tribe of Israel. So, of course, this should be a good place for them to stay. Of course, it's not, right? We get in. He goes in. I'm kind of giving a brief history of what we talked about, since I know some of us weren't here last week. But they go into the city. They don't have a place to stay. They're in the courtyard. An old man comes in from the fields, sees them there. He tells them, you're not going to stay here. You're going to stay with me. Why? It's not safe, right? Gibeah and Ramah really are just a more modern picture of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so just like we talked about, when the two angels came to Lot, Lot brought them into his house because it was not safe for them to be out in the courtyard. The same is the point here. This Levite and his concubine, his servants, was not safe to stay there. This old man knew that and brought them in their house. And so we got down, what verse did we get to exactly? 22. So we get down to verse 22. Remember, as we go through this, this is a picture of the wickedness in the minds of the people that was going on in Israel at this time. Why we have the book of Judges, them going back into sin and coming back out of it. We're getting a picture of their wickedness. So verse 22 says, "And the people," that's in chapter 20, sorry. I jumped over one. All right. "As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, 'Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally.'" And so, verse 22, it uses the word perverted. The King James, I think, uses what? Belial? Yeah. It's a Belial. Well, really, this word is a wicked man, okay? Zur said this, in Old Testament times, this was not a proper noun. It was used as a descriptive word. It meant one who had a base, worthless, lawless mind. It later came to be used especially with reference to Satan. Somebody read 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 15.
And what accord has Christ with Belial, or what part has a believer with an unbeliever?
Okay, so as Zur stated, later this word is used in reference to those that are it's really a reference to Satan. And so we're getting a picture, these men, we understand the word perverted in a similar way today. It's used to describe someone that is sexually immoral in their thoughts and things that they do. And so that's the picture that's given here. I think somebody read Jude 7. Jude 7.
Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desires, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire.
All right, so not many people, I've had some people tell me before that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was not homosexuality and what was going on there, but it was more of just, it was not a consensual thing. And so there was nothing really wrong with that was the only thing that was wrong there. Then of course this is someone that supports homosexuality, which is not right. And Jude tells us that it was wrong. The sin that caused Sodom and Gomorrah to be destroyed was because of homosexuality. That is the same thing that is going on here. Because it says they surrounded the house. They were this welcome wagon of Gibeah. We are seeing it's almost exactly like Sodom and Gomorrah, unfortunately. You have the wicked men of the city come in. And so they says they want to know him. Somebody read Genesis 19 and verse 5.
And they said, "Call to Lot, and said to him, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them permanently."
Okay, so same thing. You think about, this was a tribe of God's people, and Gibeah was a city of God's people, and their depravity, their wickedness had gotten so bad. When we were talking about this in school, our instructor, he said, with spiritual depravity comes the sexual depravity. Am I saying that right? Depravity? Yes. And Holly usually corrects me if I don't. But so the spiritual, when we lose our focus upon God, usually what happens first is the sexual depravity. With homosexuality, with the mistreatment of women, the pornography, all that stuff. That's what goes. Now, example of that, Romans chapter 1. Somebody read Romans 1, 23 through 28.
And change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible men, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of a woman, burned in their lust one for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and deceiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was committed. Even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting.
All right, so notice Paul, he talks about, of course, he's talking about, many think that this first chapter is talking about the Gentiles, but I don't see this just talking about the Gentiles, because we're seeing this picture here with the Jews in the Old Testament. But the first thing they did, the first thing that is talked about in this chapter, in Romans chapter 1, and you read verse 23 through 28, what was the first thing that went away? They changed God into something else, right? They turned their backs on God. They decided to not believe that there is a God. They turned that God into something that was created. Well, that can mean in the Old Testament as an idol, right? It can mean an idol. But what is that today? No, we don't have people carrying around idols. I mean, some people may do.
Anything you put before God.
Yeah, and most of the time in our society, what comes before God is self. And so they have turned God into themselves. They are God. That's humanism. That's this whole idea of serving myself, whatever I want, whatever I feel like is right. And so the first step was to get rid of God, and then what was the next thing that happened? Sexual depravity, homosexuality, and all of that went away. Then, if you continue reading, we stopped at 28, but then it says, so the second thing that went away was the sexual depravity of the nation, of the people, their hearts. As then verse 29 it says, and being filled with all unrighteousness, so they're already full of unrighteousness because of that. Sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. And then, of course, 32, we can't stop there. Who, knowing the true righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. We are seeing a split image of this, what Paul talks about here, in the Benjamites. Now, chapter 19 talks about their wickedness, but you get into chapter 20, the other Benjamites had an opportunity to say, yeah, those men were wicked, and we're going to destroy them. No, they didn't. They approved of it. They protected them. And they did not turn back to God. And so they dealt the same punishment. They were dealt with the same wicked, or the same end and punishment for what had happened. And so we're only seeing we're going to see the picture of their sexual depravity. What does that say about their spiritual life then? It's gone. They didn't care about God. Judges 17 and verse 6. And that every man did what was right in his own eyes. They were doing what was right in their own eyes. They had to get rid of God first to then be able to do all these other things. That is no different than today. When we give up on God, when we turn God into ourselves, when we choose to put God out of our minds, then everything else is fine. Because why? there's no punishment, there's no guilt, there's no consequence. In our minds, there is a consequence.
We have no moral standard.
We have no moral standard. I want us to think about where our nation is right now. Our nation is in this spot. Our nation is embracing transgenderism, embracing homosexuality. Not as a whole, for the most part, it's getting there.
Well, it's being taught in school.
Yeah, it's being taught in our schools. They're trying to indoctrinate our kids. A lot of these TV shows that are on, Disney, they're supposed to be just for kids, or other shows like different channels. I saw one about Netflix the other day that Netflix had. They're supposed to be centered on kids. They're targeted at 8-year-olds, and they embrace and they support and they're trying to push the agenda of transgenderism and homosexuality in these kids' shows, which then they get used to seeing it. They grow up thinking maybe there's nothing wrong with it. And so this is where our nation's at right now. Pornography is a massive industry. We talked about this last week, which we're going to say again. Usually when this happens, when men quit protecting women, they get treated like trash, and that's what's going on here, and that's what's going to lead to on our nation if we don't stop.
Said that Israel was a nation of unclean lips. I think the United States is a nation of unclean lips.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's and so all these other things that Paul talked about in Romans is going to be fine. It's going to be done. And they're already being done by many people. Look at the world today. You just turn on the news and seeing the things that's going on, how people are treating one another, abortion. That's all mentioned in Romans chapter 1. And so this picture we're seeing in Judges is a picture of really what's going on today and where our nation is headed if we don't go out and preach the gospel, right, and teach the tares, what you talked about earlier.
Out of school, and they were telling everybody that you couldn't have the Bible in school, you couldn't mention God in school and everything. I think that's where a lot of it started too.
Yep.
Started getting more prominent, and if we can't say anything against anybody else, but they can sure attack us.
Yep.
And seeing that, and it's just more.
Yep. And that's the key, is removing God. Remove God from schools, remove God from every aspect of life, our nation, then that's what goes next.
When the government took the parents' power away, that's when things started going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Because they took the power of parents to discipline their children, and they took the power of parents, well, just like here. Okay, we want to meet on Sunday and Wednesday, but they want to control the kids, so they have all these activities on Sundays and Wednesdays, and they like to do stuff on Sundays if they can push it.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't because all the other churches have Sunday worship service too, so they can't push that. But they'd like to, then they'd have complete control of all the kids. That's
Yeah.
what they, that's their, yeah, that's what their agenda. That's
Yeah.
their agenda.
Well, and for unfortunately in sports is the main thing that usually that happens in. But a lot of the other activities, they try to work, or at least our school does here, which I'm glad. They try to work around times where people are going to be in class. But unfortunately, I don't know why, but sports always is the one that gets in the way.
Because sports is most popular, but then they try to work the other activities in, so the other activities they're forced to work
Yeah.
through them. So they push them in, but that's just the way they do it. And
Mm-hmm.
then they add more activities in on top of that,
Yeah.
to get more stuff, so that the kids are doing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes back to just God's not important, so that doesn't matter to the ones making those decisions a lot of times. So.
See, when Bob was on the school board, that wasn't allowed, because we had a superintendent that was very religious in his church, and Bob was president of the school board up here, and they wouldn't allow that to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just gradually got worse.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing. We see the things that's going on in our nation. It shows the importance of going and teaching. It's the importance of teaching the gospel. And so we're seeing that picture of this wickedness here. And so verse 23, So of course 22, it tells us that they wanted him to bring this man out. So verse 23 says, but the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, no, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly, seeing this man has come into my house. Do not commit this outrage. And so this old man, he's saying, this is wickedness. This is foolish. This is, this is not right. We shouldn't be doing this. Well, that's not going to stop them, is it? No. People today would say, well, this man was homophobic then. He was one that was trying to stop them from doing something they wanted to do. Well, this would be, if something like this happened, it'd be on the news and they'd be trying to throw the person in the trash that was saying no to this. But that's not right. We're told not to. We're told, this man knew what was right. But his solution is not great. Exactly. That's why when we talked about.
We'll throw this at him
Yep.
instead.
So he's like, well, this is wrong,
Right.
but this other option's fine. Yeah. As we started this chapter, we're looking at the Benjamites, but this man, this old man, and the Levite are not right either. They're all wicked.
That, I completely agree. I think that also shows a light on how low and how vile homosexuality was, that this solution was more palatable to them than the other.
Yep, exactly. It's
Because
sad.
They knew it was so incorrect
Yep.
and not natural.
Yep, they did. And so, that brings us to verse 24. It says, look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out now. Humble them and do with them as you please, but to this man do not do such a vile thing. I think it's...
Servants ahead of them.
Huh?
The female servants ahead of both of these.
Yep, you're right.
Which is really sad.
Which is what we saw earlier when we talked about, it's exactly right.
She wasn't offered, not that any of them had been, but.
No. Yeah, it's terrible because and like I said, what is this giving a picture of? Well, this is showing us how women were treated at this time. It was and we talk about, Holly mentioned this last week, but the moral decline of a nation also comes the degrading and mistreatment of women and children. And that's happening in our nation.
I think transgenders, men playing in women's sports fit that.
I think so. Well, you think about it this way. The big fight in our nation is to allow men that are biological men to be in women's bathrooms. What is that doing? That is degrading women. That is not protecting women. That is causing, it's providing opportunity. Yeah. That's exactly what's going on here.
Because anybody can pretend that they are whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and be like, oh, I gotta use the girls' bathrooms since I'm this, and that's too much opportunity.
Yeah. Because you don't really see it the other way around.
No,
Ever.
Go in your nasty bathroom.
Yeah.
We don't take it out near your
To be
bathrooms.
honest, I don't wanna go in either.
Yeah. She's going home. Yeah. But that's right. The big fight is allowing men to be in women's sports, to be in women's bathrooms, to be in the area and place that should be protected for women. So and they're crying, many people say, well, women's rights. Is it really women's rights? No. Do they really care about women? No. Our nation is not much different than what's going on here.
Well, and most of this still goes on overseas.
It does.
It's never stopped.
Exactly. Muslim nations, women are treated
It's
like
not,
property.
they
Like,
haven't gone anywhere, they haven't gotten better,
no.
they're just constantly fighting in countries.
Yep, that's right. And so, and also it's interesting, this old man, he not only offered his daughter, but he offered the man's concubine, the man's wife. Really, she's a wife. We talked about that. You don't see the man saying, yeah, I'm going to offer my wife too, which he's fine with it. He does. But it shows just the wickedness, the depraved minds of the men. And as Holly said, the men were supposed to be protecting the women, and that's not what's going on here. And this man should have stood up for his daughter. This other man, the Levite, should have stood up for his wife, but he didn't. We're going to see how he really thought of her in a minute. So verse 25, it says, but the men would not heed him. So the man, now this man is a Levite, remember that, took his concubine and brought her out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. And then verse 26, it says, "And the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down at the door of the man's house where his master was until it was light." And so we're going to see that she dies. But this Levite man sends his concubine out. Clark had an interesting thought on the word used here. In verse 25, it says, "So the man took his concubine." Clark says this, the word, the Hebrew word there, I'm not going to pronounce it, which we here translate simply took, signifies rather to take or seize by violence. Yes, and that's right. ESV does a better job at that. "The woman would not go out to them, but her graceless husband forced her to go in order that he might save his own body." So like I said, the ESV has a better way of saying that. He forced her. She went violently. She went kicking and screaming as he cast her out the door, knowing what was going to happen to her. And he did it to save himself. He did it to protect himself. Because as we're going to see in chapter 20, when he recounts to the Israelites of what happened, he said, they wanted to kill me. He knew they wanted to kill him. And so he sent his wife out instead. Terrible.
So does the daughter not get thrown out?
No.
Instead, she gets kind of saved.
She's saved. Yeah, she doesn't end up going out. It's just the concubine. And so then ask the question, why did he do this? Why did he force her to go out? Well, it could be that he was upset because she was unfaithful to him. It doesn't matter. He shouldn't do this anyways. None of these are, huh? He didn't love her anyways. I think that's it.
Because he waited 4 months to even go after her.
Yep.
So that tells you right there, he didn't care.
No, he didn't care at all. And we're going to see in the next verse, when he comes outside and sees her laying there dead, he's like, come on, let's go. Who cares? And he was going to leave without her. He was ready to leave, but he come out and she's laying right there. Terrible. Now, I want us to think about a second here.
One of the verses you want to look at, talking about what he did there. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 23, "For the husband is head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body."
Mm-hmm.
I take that the man, the husband, is to protect his wife even to the point that he gets killed.
Yep, that's right. And that's what goes back to Lauren said. He didn't love her. Because if he really loved her, he would give his life for her instead of her having to go through this.
Well, if they would have been thinking about God at all, they would have immediately asked him for help.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to,
This could have ended differently.
oh yeah, for sure.
I think because as we're going to see, the sin of homosexuality was punishable by death under the old law. So if those men had decided, we're going to go out and kill them, God would have blessed, God would have helped them. Because at any other point in the book of Judges, when they did what God wanted, what did God do? He blessed them, he helped them, he went before them, and he delivered them into the hands. There may have been 30 or 40 men out there. Those two men, if they had God on their side, God would have helped them.
Well, what did he do in Genesis at Sodom and Gomorrah? He blinded them.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so there was another option, and he didn't want to choose that. Neither one of them, really.
I don't think it entered into their thinking because they weren't obeying God in the first place, so it didn't even enter.
Yeah. It didn't. Because, yeah, exactly. Now, when we were studying this in school, my instructor said this quote, "Hollywood is filled with people that are perverted, homosexuality, fornicators, and they love it." As we're going to see, the Benjamites, they don't rebuke these men for this. They protect them. They actually go to war to protect these men that did this wickedness. Hollywood's no different. How many TV shows praise homosexuality? How many TV shows, and I'm not saying they praise it, but they're creating the content for people to watch. Rape, incest, things like that. They're out there. Yeah, they may put it in a bad light, but why are they creating that content for people to watch? It pays, exactly, because people want to see it. We have a streaming service called VidAngel. We've been talking about it in this last week, but VidAngel, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but if you have we have Peacock and other things like that, you can filter TV shows, movies through this service and take out cussing, nudity, everything that you don't want to see. And it'll either get rid of the scene or blurt out the words. And so we can watch a few shows. I came across a show that was on Amazon I wanted to watch, and I used it through VidAngel. And Yeah, it was half gone. It was half gone. But even with Vangel getting rid of it, they were praising and making content for some rape and things that was in it. I had to stop it. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not even going to try to even watch this show because even with the filtering, it was terrible. I'm like, this is bad, but this is what Hollywood's putting out. And it's all over the place. And so it's no different. Our nation in Hollywood, really, they're putting this out there for people to watch. Kids are watching that stuff. Yeah.
If I try to show a movie at school, half the time there's some type of insinuation or there's
Yeah.
a random bad word, and I'm like,
Yeah, going back and watching some of the old movies we used to watch, like Home Alone and stuff like that, had stuff in it. You know, PG in the 80s and stuff, 90s was not the PG today.
so
Yeah, it's still close. Yeah. The thing is, you know, and we're getting off track. We're not really off track, but we're talking about this. You know, TV shows, movies, and things like that we allow in our homes. You know, we wouldn't praise this stuff, but then kids end up watching them. I'm not saying our kids are. We try to protect them, thankfully. Hopefully everybody is, from this kind of stuff. But how many kids are sitting down, uncontrolled access to these streaming services, and are just picking up some show or movie? Because this one that I'm talking about was like a superhero thing. Well, kids love superhero movies and shows. They don't know that stuff's in it, and they start watching it, and they go, whoa. It just points to the fact that we as parents have a responsibility to filter that, to not put that in front of our kids.
I have kindergartners that come to school and tell me about shows that I've never watched because I don't want to, but they just sit down and watch them with their parents, and then they imitate some things that come out of it, and
Yeah,
they end up in trouble. But,
they do.
you know, that's just, I mean, they come to school and I'm like,
That's happening more.
I'm not even watching this. Like, I wouldn't even watch that stuff. You shouldn't be watching. You're in kindergarten, right?
Yeah. And like I said, the movies and shows, they may not put this into a good light, but the kids see it and they start thinking, gives them ideas, gives them thoughts, gives them things. And not just kids, adults the same way.
Gives them lots of new words to use too.
Gives them lots of work. Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. And so when we look at this situation, and it's hard to read this, and we go, well, I can't believe that this is in here for us to read. But God put this here for a reason. It shows the wickedness of Israel at that time, but it also gives us a picture of what it could be like for us today, too. And so this wickedness that's going on is terrible. And so we look at verse 26. So she had fell down. She crawled back to her husband, really. They had abused her to the point of death. Notice verse 27. And when her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, "Get up and let us be going." But there was no answer. So the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. Notice the first thing I thought about when I saw this was he got up in the morning to leave, not expecting to see his concubine ever again. He was getting ready to go home. And as he's going, he goes, "Oh, wait, there she is. Well, let's go. Get up." Well, she's dead.
She only made it to the threshold.
Yeah,
Which means she couldn't knock. Like, she got almost there and
she died right there. And so he had no care for her. He had no love for her. It's just terrible. And so then it gets worse, verse 29. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was that all who saw it said, "No such deed has been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up from the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up." And so he cuts her in 12 pieces and sends her to all the tribes. Now, as we get into chapter 20, think about this. 12 pieces, what would that include? What tribe? Benjamin. So Benjamin got a piece also. And so as we get into chapter 20, we're going to see them go, when the army's coming up against them, go, "What's wrong?" They knew what was wrong. They knew what was going on. They didn't care.
that he had no respect to bury her.
Nope. Nope, exactly. He should have buried her, but he didn't. Clark said this, if you will not come and avenge my wrongs, may ye be hewn in pieces like this abused and murdered woman. That was the message that would be sent, in a sense, of what Clark would think, with this, sending these pieces of her out. And he says, continue, it was a custom among the ancient Highlanders in Scotland. When one clan wished to call all the rest to avenge its wrongs, it would take a wooden cross, dip it in the blood, and send it by special messenger throughout all the clans. This was called the fire cross because of at the side of each clan lighted a fire or beacon, which gave notice to all the adjoining clans that the general rising was immediately to take place. And so it's a picture of a call to arms, a call to destroy this wickedness. Now, somebody read 1 Samuel 11 and verse 7. 1 Samuel 11 and verse 7.
He took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hand of the messengers, saying, whoever does not come out after Saul and Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen. Then the dread of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out as one man.
Okay, so this was done with an oxen later on to send a message. He treated her like an oxen, is what basically I see this. He treated her like an animal in dividing her up and sending this message out. He could have easily went into each clan and talked to them and told them what had happened and treated his wife better than what he did, but he didn't.
I do not understand why he would have done that if he did this to her in the first place.
I know. It doesn't make any sense. I know. He put her out there in that position.
He's trying to make himself look better.
I think so. And he's going to be the one that stands up and tells the Israelites next chapter what happened. Yep, exactly. And so he tells them in verse 30, the people, they're enraged by this, of course, which is good. Israel is reacting the way that they should. They were upset that this terrible thing had happened. And as we're going to see, they unite as one. That is used several times in the next chapter. They unite as one. They unite as one. They were determined to get rid of this wickedness, and they were not going to stop until it was done, and they were wiped out. And to the point where all we had left was 600 men of the whole tribe. The women, children, and all the other men were completely wiped out of Benjamin at the end of the next chapter. So, like I said, this is definitely a terrible thing, but this is a picture of what happens to humanity when they get rid of God. This is what happens to humanity when they put God out of their minds and do what they think is right in their own eyes. This is a great example for this. People say today that morality is just determined by what you think. They say, well, morals are just, they don't come from a central place. Morals are determined by a culture. Morals are determined by a group of people. Well, that doesn't work because one person says, well, this is right, and the other person says it's wrong. What's going to happen? There's going to be a conflict. But when we go back to God being the center of morals and what is right and wrong, that is what we need to, things are different. Things are better. And this is a picture of what could happen today, unfortunately. Any questions or comments on chapter 19? We'll probably just stop there. We are going to be starting chapter 20 soon. We'll start it next week and pick up there. And if nothing else, nobody had anything else? All right. Thank you guys for your time.